Colonel, pleasure to speak to you again. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yeah, things are, again, I say this every day, and it's not a lie. Things continue to get worse. So yesterday, we had a major strike on the biggest oil field in Iran, the world's biggest oil field, which supplies pretty much a big portion or the majority of Iran's electricity and Iraq's electricity, which Iran's cut off now. And as expected, Iran retaliated in kind by striking a large Qatari gas field as well, and causing significant damage, long-term damage that will take years to repair, according to a report that just came out. I'm going to get you the exact source in a second. But what's going on? And then Trump made a post as well, Colonel, saying, no, there was a report by Wall Street Journal Axios that said Trump authorized the strike. And then Trump put out a Truth Social post, essentially throwing Israel under the bus, saying we did not authorize this. There's a lot happening. And by the way, as we start this, the power stations in Haifa have been struck and they're burning as well. So Iran is striking Israel's energy grid as well. So please help us make sense of why. Why did they do this in the first place, and where is this going to head?
Well, I mean, Israel has started a war, and with our help, and we've helped, and that war has quickly, within 2.5 weeks, become existential. So when it becomes existential, and you can know this from the energy attacks, but what we really see, I think, that really told us for Israel that they're in trouble is what their defense minister, Israel Katz, said, that now all targeting of leadership and political figures, media, whatever that they want in Iran can be done without going up the chain to get clearance for it. It can, if you identify somebody, you have a location, you take the shot. That is, of course, a sign of desperation. It is a sign that they are urgently trying to get the hits in. Israel is trying to get the hits in that they can before they are unable to not only defend themselves, which is getting close to that now. I mean, if their electrical grid in a very small country is knocked out, that's poor defense. Their defense has been, I think, wasted and depleted at this point. So for Israel, it's become existential. For Iran, honestly, they were attacked. They're defending their country. Everything is existential. I mean, they must fight, or else it's gone for them. I mean, this is the view. So now the United States, we're idiots. Okay, President Trump thinks that he can theatrically program and direct war actions, war activities, regime changes, surgical attacks, opening up straits. He thinks that he can do this all as if it was done in Hollywood. And of course he can't. And he's joined himself at the hip with Israel, who has very different objectives. It's not existential for the United States yet. Now, it would be good advice for any country that is heavily in debt, as we are, and that doesn't have a strong industrial base, to sustain a long war. It would be smart for a country like the United States not to enter into wars without planning first, which is what we did in this case. So it may become existential for the United States, is what I'm saying. I mean, we may be an energy exporter, but we still import oil. We import oil, export and import, and we import what we need. If we can't get what we need, and that includes not just oil, maybe some gas. We have a lot of gas, but what we don't have a lot of is fertilizer. We don't have a lot of aluminum smelters here. We don't create aluminum much in the United States. So, a lot of the things that we import, that we need to import, one by one, two by two, these things are going to not be available to the United States. So this track that we're on is a global war with destruction of any country that has not prepared for it, and any country that behaves extremely stupidly. So that doesn't look good for Israel, doesn't look good for the United States. For Iran, they've prepared for it. Russia, China, they have observed the United States. They understand how our system works. They understand our capacity for debt accumulation. They understand how our marketplace works. They are hedging. They've been hedging for a long time on what happens, X, Y, Z. They have a plan for that. The problem is Americans, we have no plan for anything. Use the dollar and buy our treasuries and let our government spend and borrow, that's our plan. And that's not a plan. And that's coming to an end. So I hate to waste the word existential because it's such a serious word, but it's getting that way for pretty much all the parties around here.
While you were speaking as well, just came out, which just really caught me by surprise. We saw allies come together and reject any involvement in reopening the Strait of Hormuz. And for them, they didn't start this war. Why should they get involved now in cleaning up the mess? You know, you break it, you fix it. Well, the report just came in now, just reading it not long ago, actually. And it says UK, France, Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands and Japan issue a joint statement expressing, quote, their readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, while welcoming countries undertaking preparations, coordinating strategic petroleum reserve releases, and exploring ways to boost output. Could we see countries that did not start this war, but they were forced to face the consequences of the war, get involved in reopening the Strait of Hormuz? And what does that mean for Iran and the war?
They're not going to get involved unless the U.S. Navy is leading the way. And the U.S. Navy is not going to get involved until the threat is gone. And it's not gone yet. So that sounds like a statement of after the fact of what's actually already happening. Okay, what are these countries really doing? Well, they're checking their resources. They're harboring some, they're like nurturing and husbanding some of their resources that are soon going to be in short supply if they're not already. And they are talking amongst each other, and they are giving a verbal support to the United States because they are American allies. And at the end, they say, well, they say it at the beginning, but it doesn't matter if they say it at the beginning or the end. Then they say, oh, well, yeah, when you guys start opening up the strait, yeah, we'll help you out. We may refuel you. You can refuel or use, we will help you. And maybe we'll send a ship or two. Those are words, and they're diplomatic words. They're words to ensure that Donald Trump doesn't send a Truth Social message about the evilness of this or that country. That's what that is. That is diplomatic protection. Nobody's going into the Strait of Hormuz until the U.S. Navy is willing to go into the Strait of Hormuz, and it's not willing to do that yet.
Yeah, I just don't know. We're talking about this becoming, it's already a regional war. We saw yesterday's escalation was significant. The strikes on the Gulf countries, including Saudi. Did you see the Gulf countries were meeting in Saudi, and Iran struck Saudi, Riyadh, and they've never struck Riyadh to that extent ever. And they struck it while the Gulf countries were meeting in Riyadh. I'm trying to understand what Iran's message is. And my worry is that wouldn't that alienate Gulf countries that might have considered supporting Iran early on, especially Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, that are more empathetic to Iran's cause and more critical of Israel? Isn't it? Why is Iran doing this? Is it because we also have reports, just to be clear as well, there's reports that Gulf countries are allowing Kuwait and others, I can't remember which, maybe it's Bahrain as well, but Kuwait is allowing their territory to be used to strike Iran. I think it's pretty important to note as well.
Yeah, I think, Iran has been warning for years and years, and you're not the only ones, but particularly the Gulf states, that your friendship and support of the United States, their military in particular, your investments there, and even your friendship with Israel and your dealings with Israel, they are not going to improve your situation, because in Iran's view, you can't trust Israel, you can't trust the United States. Now, why would Iran think that? Well, obviously, they've been on the receiving end of, both aggression and lies for many, many years, and even past regime changes, right? I mean, this is how we treat Iran. So they have a perspective of the United States and Israel that they have been sharing with the Gulf states. And the Gulf states, the leadership, and in some cases, these are small population countries of, the leadership is kind of an elite in many ways, that the leadership has said, no, we think it's good. We will work with them. This will help us out. We are diversifying our economy, and working with the Americans in Israel helps us diversify our economy away from oil and become financial centers and all these other things. And so they have made a bet, and Iran has warned them against that bet repeatedly. And now Iran, US is using, Israel is using their airspace. The United States is using their land facilities to attack Iran, and Iran has been very open with it. So I don't think the Iranian side is much of a mystery. What's a mystery is that no one took Iran seriously. That is what it seems to me. And also the Gulf countries themselves, part of why they were meeting well, obviously they're all suffering and this is a horrendous situation, but they're meeting to say, wait a minute, did we make a mistake in putting our eggs in this US basket and opening up with Israel when actually they're doing horrific things to both Arabs and to Persia. You know, the way this war has shifted rapidly into hitting schools, hospitals, residential areas, causing environmental disasters and energy. You know, remember, Iran did not hit energy hard. They didn't strike any LNG fields, and they tried to protect energy infrastructure. In fact,
Initially, before yesterday.
That's right. But then who did the first thing? Well,
the oil depot. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Trump said, well, I approved it. No, I didn't approve it. I didn't know about it. I wish they hadn't done that.
You're talking about about a week ago or so. The initial one where they struck the oil depots and then the oil started raining down, and then Iran responded by striking oil facilities in Oman, in Qatar, etc.
Yeah.
And now we have the same thing happening.
Black rain. Yes, that's I'm talking about that. But then also other strikes that have been going on have increasingly encroached on this. So the rules of engagement, there aren't any from the Israeli side. They do whatever they want. But as they have expanded their target list, and we are doing it too. Trump saying that he didn't approve this or he didn't know about it. I don't know how much you can believe of that. In any case, we are implicated by whatever Israel has done. So now that they are expanding the war, Iran is fighting back. Now, if this war had gone according to Trump's assumptions, which you can't say they were based on intelligence because he apparently didn't have any good intelligence. But his assumptions were that in a few days, there would be no offensive or defensive capability in Iran. That was his assumption, within a few days. And then they said, well, maybe within a week we'll do it. But that was a bad assumption. And there's a thing going around. You may have seen it. I forget I don't know if it was the Iranian president or one of their spokespeople. And basically that the United States has now destroyed 320% of all of Iran's military and missile capability. And they're shooting for 500%. So they've destroyed it well more than there ever was. And yet the waves of missile attacks keep coming steadily.
Yeah, and their strike rate, I think the interception rates seem to be dropping. I haven't looked at the numbers, but like the amount of attacks dropped significantly since the early days, but they've managed to sustain it. Yesterday was a pretty big barrage, but also we're seeing a lot of strikes. We just see the strike now on Haifa, and they're including cluster munitions. They're using, I don't know how often they're using it, but they started using the big missile, what's it called? The Karashnig missile that it can carry up to 2-ton warhead and can carry cluster munitions, and has a speed of Mach 8 to 16, anywhere from 8 to 16, I think about 10 to 15. But it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to intercept. At least THAAD batteries can't intercept it. But it seems that Iran is starting to start using those missiles. We don't know how many they have in their stockpiles, but obviously they have the launchers to fire them. So it's not just drones. Like the initial goal was to destroy all the launchers. Iran depends on drones alone, and then try to destroy Iran's capability from using these drones. But not only have they not been able to destroy Iran's capabilities of using the drones, but the missile launchers are still there. And also the other strategy was to destroy the command and control structure. They did. They've killed a lot of leaders very successfully, Larijani being the latest one. And I think there's one other after him. I think it's yesterday another one got killed. But Iran continues to function. Their decentralized structure seems to be working well. And they seem to be, adamant on fighting this till the end. I think that's one thing I've noticed as well.
It is their country. It is their country, and they were attacked. And the country is under attack on all the sectors of society. Of course they're going to.
Why is Trump
to go?
Yeah, why is Trump true? Like, if you're gonna go in there and say this is regime change, of course they're gonna fight till the end. Now, one point though is Trump made it clear as well. He's happy to work with the same regime, but just someone more lenient to American interests. But Iran, and they've said this many times, they want to make sure this never happens again. They've said this so many times. I think there was a new statement today. We will not accept any deal unless we get some sort of guarantees that this won't happen again. How can we offer such guarantees to Iran? How can they trust the US after getting bombed twice during negotiations by Israel or the US? And how could they? Who else could offer them security guarantees, and how would that look like?
Well, first off, they can't trust the United States, not at all. We've proven that repeatedly. So what their public plan is, and actually what they've done, is to remove American forces from the region. Now, they haven't removed them yet. Now, we actually have vacated some of our facilities. So in a sense, we've temporarily removed our facilities, and some of the stuff's been destroyed or moved out of the way. What Iran wants to do is make sure they don't come back. That's part of how, so it's like Reagan's trust but verify, right? Yeah. America will say this is never going to happen again. And Iran is going to verify that it's not going to happen again, because they're going to make sure the Americans are not in right off their doorstep. So that's the thing.
So removing American bases from the Gulf is one of the ways to do that.
Permanently is what they want.
That's
to
significant.
Do.
That is very significant.
It's huge. And and this is actually, I think, why, beyond the existential survival thing, I think why the energy, the economic, the global financial system is being debased right now. It is a target. It's a legitimate target. In a survival war, so everything's a legitimate target. So they're targeting this to weaken the United States, so that when President Trump or Vance or whoever the next president is says, well, we took a lot of hits. This cost us $1 trillion in Iran. We didn't get anything. And also we lost all our facilities. We have to go restart. They're going to say to the Congress and to the American people, we need to replenish our lily pad bases and all of our military presence in the region for this reason or that reason, whether it's Israel, oil, whatever it is, they'll say something. And the American people will say, you know what? We're broke. We're in a depression. I mean, a real depression, because our financial system is so fragile. It is not resilient in any way, shape, or form. We have debt bubbles exploding here, there, and everywhere. So we are highly vulnerable to financial disruption. So this is a long game. Yes, I think they're chasing us out of the region, and I think they're facilitating a inability of the United States to ever put that level of force or forces in the region. This is one of their goals. Then, of course, what you have is, if Israel isn't destroyed this time, they want it so weakened that it will be contained. Because
but will Israel and the US accept that? That's what worries me, is that now we're in a position where
yeah, I don't think we're going to get a choice. What do you mean accept that? Can we afford to replace a military posture that has proven to be costly, stupid, idiotic, unpopular, and Americans don't have the money to pay for that? Now, will there be room for other bases? And this is to the second part of your other question. Will Russian and Chinese bases be invited into Iran? Has it happened before? Maybe that's going to happen. Maybe that's how they're going to do it. But the world is shifting. It's changing. And I think this is a pretty significant thing from 3 weeks ago when this started. But now what we're seeing is there is some permanence to the changes that are being inflicted on the Middle East.
Because I'm looking at all the odds, the various platforms that give you odds of what people are betting on, and the likelihood of the war ending by next month just dropped by half. It was like 50-50.
Sure.
Now it's at 34%. It ends by next month, in a month and a half. Yeah. 7% chance it ends this month, so pretty much no chance. Wow. So we're set for a prolonged war. And I think this is because there's such a dichotomy between what America wants, what Trump wants, and what Iran wants. The US wants a capitulation of the regime. The US want to control the Strait of Hormuz. Iran want to ensure they are never attacked again. They want the regime to maintain power, and they want to control they want to maintain their control of the Strait of Hormuz. There is no middle ground anymore. And then there's America's allies. They're in a position now where they need to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. They are pissed that the US started this war that they found to be unnecessary. But what choice do they have? They need that strait opened. What do they do?
They work with Iran. Look, Iran is already letting Chinese ships, Indian ships, not a lot of Indian ships, but some, and other people who are—
I think Pakistani as well.
Yeah. So they are not, in some ways, and they've said this themselves, the strait isn't closed. It's closed to American allies.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you, and that's a brilliant thing to do if they can manage it. And I don't know how long they can manage it, but as long as they can manage it, it's very smart, because now you can peel off former U.S. allies, because they absolutely must have trade. And as far as the Gulf states go, they need food. They import what they need there. So those ships have to come in loaded and leave loaded. And
just on that point though, America, but these European allies, they need Iran, but they need the US a lot more. The US has bases across Europe. The US is part of NATO. The US is funding Ukraine, allowing Ukraine to sustain Russia.
Yeah, I'm talking about our Arab allies. I think they're going to peel the Arab allies off first.
Ah, the Gulf.
The Gulf, yes, because
Yeah.
the Gulf is really in a bad situation in terms of not just their economy, but their care and feeding other people and that kind of thing. So, and they're close to the region, and they know Iran. They're neighbors. You got to live with your neighbors one way or the other, except unless you're Israel. Israel, you just bomb them. But most people, you tend to live with your neighbors, even if you don't like them that much. You have issues, but there's things you can work with. That's what they're going to do. I think Iran is definitely open to. If these guys don't want to be American allies, they don't want to ever have American bases in their region or in their countries, then that is something that Iran can work with. And I think they're willing to do that. And this is actually what Israel fears the most, because if America turns its back on the region, I mean, we are an oil exporter. What else is our interest in the region? We export oil. We're competitors. We're bigger than OPEC. So if we leave, then suddenly Israel's issues aren't front and center on the American newspapers every single day, because there's a war. Think about it. We've had war for 30 years in the Middle East. I mean, there's not a kid or an old person in this country that hasn't read about there's war in the Middle East, and a subset of those people think, oh, Israel is under terrible attack and it must have our help. Let's imagine if that message ends because we don't have any troops over there, and that's not our business. We don't have a defense treaty with Israel. The United States does this all on the back of a napkin in a bar.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see what is Israel going to do now? Because they keep doing things that Trump walks back. So what I'm trying to understand is Trump throwing them under the bus. Are they doing what they please and letting Trump deal with the mess afterwards? Because they have a very different objective to the US. The US is happy to work with a new leader of the regime that's more, like a Delcy Rodriguez type person. Israel wants the regime collapse. Israel doesn't mind Iran becoming a failed state. Gulf countries, they want Iran weakened. They've said this in the statements yesterday to make sure they're not struck again. But at the same time, they don't want Iran to become a failed state. And Gulf nations are also split. Some are very hawkish, like Saudi. Others, like Oman, are more willing to work with Iran and coexist like they've coexisted for all these decades. And the rest are somewhere in the middle, depending on who it is. So you've got all these different players. Europe and Asia just want the war to end. They want the Gulf opened, the Strait opened. China wants Iran there because it gives China control of the Strait of Hormuz. So you've just got all these different countries now. That's how proxy wars look like. They all want different interests. With Israel, destruction. The US, control of the Straits. China want to keep control of the Straits. Gulf just want peace based on different terms, depending on which country. Europe and Asia, especially Asia just want the oil and gas flowing again. That's a recipe for disaster. Like, what happens then? Like,
well, you have to.
Who dictates what happens?
Well, who dictates what happens is who's standing, who is leveraging power. And it bothers me that I know Saudi says, well, we want to make sure that Iran can never strike us again. I'm asking myself, oh, that's right. You're always being hit by Iran, aren't you? This is the first time that the Gulf has been attacked by Iran, the very first time in years and years of potential attacks, but they never occurred. They did not occur. So why is Iran striking them? Well, because Israel started a war that they drugged the United States into, or we started a war because Israel advised us to, whatever it is. I don't know I'm sure it was Israel's idea, but we certainly were willing partners, and we still are willing partners. So there's many ways out of this, but the person who holds the cards, the country that has the cards, is the country that is most resilient, the country that has the most coherent strategy, and the country who has its eyes on the long-term game. Okay, which country is that? Now, certainly Iran, to a lesser extent, Israel. Israel has a long-term game here. Obviously, it is greater Israel surrounded by weak, disarmed, and chaotic Arab and Persian neighbors, North African neighbors. This is their plan. I mean, they're planning to put an Israeli military base in Somaliland, right? This is part of the expansion of the Israeli empire. But honestly, in today's world, to have an empire with 9 million people and an economy that is overwhelmingly military oriented, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. It's not like an American empire. It's not like the European empires. That's what they want. That's their agenda. We have no idea what we're doing in the White House. Clearly,
I'm trying to understand.
No.
I'm trying to understand what are Gulf countries thinking right now, because on one side, okay, Iran is striking them, and obviously they want that to stop, and that's, if you look at that in a silo, that seems like Iran is an aggressive enemy that's striking neighboring countries that are not attacking Iran. Now, when you put it holistically, Iran is fighting for survival. Those countries host American bases, and apparently Iran is being attacked from some of those countries, like Kuwait, allegedly. So my question to you is, like, why aren't we seeing criticism of this war in the first place? Why, when Macron put out a statement, foreign minister actually responded to him saying, hey, you're criticizing us for striking the energy infrastructure in the Gulf. What about yesterday when our gas plant was struck? Why is no one criticizing that?
Yeah.
And Gulf countries put out those statements criticizing Iran. Why aren't they criticizing the US and Israel's war? Is everyone just obliged to follow America's decision because no one has a choice? America's still the world's superpower. Because for me, you got to criticize both. Okay, you got to criticize Iran's response as striking all these countries. Some of them don't deserve it, like Oman. But you also got to criticize Israel and the US for starting this war in the first place. Why is everyone silent on that, other than like Russia and China?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I wonder if that particular dam is going to break soon. Because I think the pressure that the Gulf states in particular are under, it's an actual food issue almost. I think it's becoming a food issue if it's not already. So they're kind of under siege in a way, even though they didn't even start this war and we didn't tell them we were setting this war off. We blindsided these countries. So it's very possible that what you're saying is what's going through the minds of many countries, less so in Europe, but more so in the Gulf states. And they're saying, okay, can we cut a deal? And I think Iraqi and also other spokesmen from Iran have said, we will work with you in getting ships up and out of the strait, in the strait and out of the strait. We will work with you. If you want to do what we're asking, which is to disavow and get rid of the American forces in your country and do not make your airspace and your resources available to them to strike us. If you're willing to do that, we'll work with you individually. And I don't know how much trust has been developed over time between Iran and, say, Saudi Arabia. There was a rapprochement that occurred not too long ago, and it's just new, it's young. So there's still distrust between these countries. But Iran is in a position, they're holding the cards, much easier for them to peel off American supporters in the region and globally. And I think they're going to do that. And who's vulnerable to being peeled off? Well, the ones who are being hurt the worst. And right now, I would say many of the Gulf states are being hurt badly. Israel's being pounded, but
yeah, they are.
The Gulf states
this is what's
innocent here in some ways.
Yes, so I'm a bit confused. Why? Yeah, I'm confused. Like, why aren't we seeing more? The odds are all pointing to a prolonged war, because unless Iran's capabilities are a lot weaker than it seems, but if they're striking Gulf energy infrastructure, they're striking US bases. Now, the US damages have been very limited. They've had lost a few radars, but very limited when you compare to the Gulf and Israel, of course. And they're pounding Israel on a daily basis with the cluster munitions. And also Hezbollah hasn't been defanged, they're still striking Israel. What am I missing here? Why is everyone saying there's going to be a prolonged war? Why are not... is it back to the argument that Iran doesn't want to end it? Because at the same time, Iran's getting pummeled as well. Iran could lose a lot. Like if the US goes scorched earth, which hopefully they don't, humanitarian damage would be, hopefully people will take it into consideration and put it above politics at some stage, but they could still do a lot of damage. So I just feel like all parties have a lot of incentive to end the war. The US cut your losses short, enough debt, enough wasting your munitions, and Trump can paint it as a win. Israel, stop getting bombed. Gulf, obviously they want it to end, and Iran, stop getting destroyed. Like, I just feel like there's a lot of incentive for ending the war, but obviously that's not enough.
Well, think about who started it. Okay, the U.S. and Israel started it with a sneak attack in the middle of diplomacy. The second time they've done it, they were not negotiating in good faith. Apparently, the Witkoff and Kushner are real estate stooges who are just seeking investment. It turns out they're not diplomats. Surprise, surprise. So none of this was done in good faith. Then we attack them. Israel attacks them. They were prepared for it in many ways, but why are we asking Iran to stop? The guy who says the war stops is the guy that's holding the cards. Okay. And the other guy says, uncle. So Iran is nowhere near saying, they're nowhere near crying out uncle, right? stop beating me. I'm done. They're not there yet. I think the bets are probably in Iran, and also the anger and rage that they must feel by the way they've been treated and slaughtered and continuing to have their, civilian infrastructure destroyed. They're ready to still fight. They're not giving up. It's not their fault. They didn't cause this. Okay. And when I say they didn't cause this, they weren't making a nuclear weapon. They weren't 2 weeks from a nuclear weapon. They were negotiating in good faith and making horrendously amazing, from an Iranian perspective, commitments to really reduce even their nuclear energy capability, which is something no country should be asked to do. And so they were cooperating, and then they got spit in the face and beat up. And so it's not for them to say, uncle, oh, let's have peace. It'll be better for everyone. They have said they don't want this to happen again. They have a long-term strategy. And honestly, if you think about where Russia, China, particularly Russia and China stand when they look at this, if you're sitting back looking at this where you're not there, you're not connected to it, but you're just watching the resource flows. This war is draining America's in soft power, military power, and economic power. Every single day, a huge drain. And also domestic political stability. Trump is losing his core. He says one thing, another thing. It's becoming a running joke that when they do an interview with Trump, when they ask press questions of him, he contradicts himself 3 times on the same question in a space of 2 minutes. So all of this damage, if you were Russia and China, you would want to have this war go as long as possible.
But the worry is that if the US wins, like if things turn,
what's winning though? What is winning?
And that's controlling the strait. So if they destroy Iran's ability to keep firing drones and missiles, and they send troops, which I know from a military perspective is a massive risk, but if they manage to control the Strait of Hormuz through Kargal and the other islands at that opening, that would give the US a massive advantage, a massive leverage over China when it comes to energy, because China depends on that strait so much so, and they import much more of their energy than the US. So if that happens, which right now it doesn't seem to be happening, then that could end up being a big win for the US, though.
With what troops might we do that, though? You think our army's big enough to go in there and even take Karg Island? Do you know how to get? You know where Karg Island is? It's not at the mouth of the strait. It's way up in there. So, and that's a heavily defended, almost impossible to.
But can't they pummel the Iranian military, so it ends up becoming like Iraq?
Well,
or Syria.
Iraq had, I think, 35 million people, a really evenly divided society, Sunni, Shia, Kurd, right? I mean, it's like a little more Sunni, but almost a third Shia, almost a third Kurd, right? So it's like you've got that. It was also not, it was held together by Saddam with, his Ba'ath ideology, Marxist ideology, political, secular. It was a secular state. So a secular state is not unified by a religious life after death type unified idea about their country, their faith, the afterlife, their mission, their destiny, all of it being integrated into the political system. That's not what a secular state does. That's the very opposite of a secular state. So Iraq was a very different situation, of course, much smaller. And also, I think Iraq has some mountains, but it has a lot of like open plains, like Poland used to have. Remember when the armies of the East and West would run over Poland? It's like you couldn't stop because it was just wide open. And I think that's Iraq. So from a geographic perspective, from a political perspective, from a demographic and population perspective, no comparison at all. So that won't work. And we sent in, I think, 150,000 troops at one time, and that was in advance. That's as we tried to prepare the battlefield. We didn't prepare anything this time. We said, oh, this will be over with by Tuesday. Go in Saturday, come out Tuesday. We got a big regime change. It's going to be great. We didn't have troops in place. I mean, why in the heck are they even sending the Marine Expeditionary Unit, giving them orders 10 days into this war that was only supposed to last 4 days? Clearly, they didn't have a plan to put troops on the ground, and they don't have enough. There's only, you take the MEU, that's less than 2,500 Marines. You're not going to even get to the Karg Island if that's what you're trying to do. It's just not going to happen.
What if he takes it out? So there's a comment that Trump made just a few minutes ago.
Oh, I heard. Yeah.
We can take out the island anytime we want. We've taken out everything but the pipes. We left the pipes because rebuilding them would take years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he's just essentially, isn't he just saying we will take control of Garg Island? Isn't that what he's saying in that comment? Like,
well, he can
our goal,
destroying it doesn't preserve the resource, right? The resource that Asia needs, which is this ability to get this oil out. I mean, if they destroy that, and it does, that is a very nihilistic, existential type approach. He also said, before he said this, he talked yesterday. I think it was yesterday. He sent out a tweet. Maybe I'll just end it. Maybe I'll not end the war, end Iran. We'll just destroy the whole thing, which is, of course, obviously nuclear language, right?
Do you really think he meant that? Because he also said, there's another comment he made. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's scary. Like he said, we could end it today as well. We could end this in 2 seconds. I don't know what he means that, but yeah. I don't know if that's a casual nuke threat or something else, but
we should ask Putin what he means, because he was going to end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. That didn't.
If that's what he means, that's a much better thing that's much better than him meaning to nuke it. So I hope that's what he means. That's a positive thing. There's also a lot of concern about, and more and more people. I was speaking to who was it yesterday? I was speaking to Colonel Wilkerson, and we're talking about the risk of Israel using a tactical nuke. Mm-hmm. Larry Wilkerson, who worked under Colin Powell. And he's one of many voices, including, David Sachs said it in Trump's administration. He said it on a personal level, the crypto and AIs are like, what are we doing? Even mentioning that on Iran. Now, we're not talking about a war between China and the US. We're not talking about a direct clash between Russia and the US. We're not talking about China attacking American bases where you use such rhetoric. We're talking about an unnecessary war against a powerful military, but we're not fighting a Japan or China.
No, and also, of course, when the United States dropped the bombs, on Japan, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki, the war was over for all intents and purposes. This was a demonstration bomb, and it wasn't it was geared to send a message, even though it obviously killed tons of people, was very immoral. But it was not part of a losing war. It was part of a war we had pretty much won. And now we were going to set the stage. Don't mess with us. We have this. It was our last chance, really, to drop it was the military-industrial complex and the government's last chance to really test out nuclear weapons, which is why they sent 2 different types to see how they would work. I mean, this whole thing was, anyway, we weren't.
Is that why? Hold on. Is that why they did 2? They did 2 to test.
But they're 2 different ones. Remember Fat Boy, Little Man, and Fat Boy?
Oh, yes, of course.
2 different types, very different types. We wanted to, and a big part of what we did is when those things are going, we collected data, all kinds of data on the conquered Japan, because it was already pretty well conquered. I mean, anyway, that's a different thing. So using nuclear weapons, talking about it, like this suggestion, hinting around that, we could do a nuclear weapon, or somebody might do a nuclear weapon. This is actually a sign of desperation, because the United States economy and the world economy, the Western economy, not the world economy, China will be fine. Okay. This idea that China won't be fine with no energy, China has energy. Okay. They have more renewable energy and nuclear energy than anybody else on the planet. So you think they will beef that up? Sure, they'll do it. They'll adapt just like everybody adapts. But the United States economy, our financial system and our government is so leveraged and is so out of whack that we can't survive it. And we won't survive it if this thing goes 6 months. I say we the people will suffer through like any people do, but the government won't survive. The financial backers of our government, our elites, will be harmed irreparably, okay, if this goes 6 months. So that's why you're hearing the talk of, some sort of horrendously unnecessary nuclear attack or nuclear explosion to end this thing, because it is existential for the United States financial system that the straits stay open, and also that our relationships, our financial dealings with some of the wealthiest countries in the world continue. I think Iran's going to peel off some Gulf Cooperation Council states, because they need to get ships in and out, and they're going to cut a deal with Iran to do that. And that deal is going to be, the base that I hosted has already been destroyed or damaged, and there's nobody working there now because the soldiers all left. Then, I guess I can say I'm not hosting the Americans and I'll work with Iran. If this starts happening and Iran does what Trump wants to do, which is to leverage control of the Hormuz Strait to make money, okay? That's what Trump wants the Hormuz Strait for. He wants the Hormuz Strait to make sure that people stay warm in Europe. He wants control over the Strait of Hormuz so that he can tariff and tax folks in and out of there and take the profit. He is a real estate guy. Okay, he understands rents. This is what he understands. Not strategy, not war fighting, but he understands rents. And to send two real estate guys as your negotiators, I mean, my God, it's so obvious. Anyway, but I think from a Chinese and Russian perspective, they sit back and look at this every day. The United States holistic system, military, industrial, political, financial, is weakened. Every single day it is weakened. This is very brutal and Machiavellian to say, but I wouldn't be surprised if China and Russia's interests here are similar to Iran's, but is to let Iran take the beating, which they will take, and they're capable of taking it for months and months and months. And as that beating is taken by Iran, this great American power that throws its weight around is gutted.
How long could Iran sustain this, though, Colonel, from what you're seeing? Because I understand this already sustained it a lot longer than expected. But when you have fighter jets flying over you, bombing you nonstop, eventually you're going to run out of launches. You're going to run out of underground launchers, underground bunkers, eventually even stockpiles of missiles.
Sure.
Drones are different.
Everybody's going to run out of stuff. But the question is, how fast will each side run out? So here's the thing. Over here, like in our American media, we're constantly being shown charts that say, oh my God, Iran is weakened because they've launched fewer, they'll show a chart from the day one of the war to the present.
Yeah, exactly.
It's smaller and smaller numbers of missiles and drone attacks happening. Okay. But what they're not telling us is, since the first round of missile attacks and using all their cheaper stuff, their older stuff, has depleted air defense and has run the American military into a purely, we've hightailed it out of there in most places. We don't have people there to fight. We don't have people there to fix the stuff. The radars that they bombed, we're going around the world trying to find spare radars. Okay, we're not replacing them or repairing them. We're not staying in that fight. So what's happening is Iran does not need as many missiles and drone strikes to cause even greater damage, because the first 2 weeks of the war really penetrated Israel's defenses and clearly penetrated the Gulf countries' defenses. So it's like, you can look at it once, you have to look at it in the context of what's happening on both sides. So if Israel's defenses are decimated, they're not decimated yet, but let's say they're weaker than they were, it takes a lot fewer, which actually, like, if their defenses were good, I think people had said, I've read, Iran may have 6 months worth before they're completely out. But that's if Israel's defenses are working. Their air defenses are effective.
And the Gulf as well.
But we've shot the Patriots out. The PAC-3s are pretty well gone. We have used up our capability to do this. So now it takes less for them.
What am I missing, Colonel? Why do that? There must be more munitions. Why do that? Why take THAAD batteries out of South Korea and keep depleting munitions that were already low? Is this how important the Strait of Hormuz is? And that's just weird to me.
Trump could get the Strait of Hormuz opened in a heartbeat. And all he has to do is say to them, not publicly, not in a tweet, he needs to send real diplomats there and say, you know what? You have a point, Iran. And we're sorry we hit you. That's just words. Iran wants two things. They want the American bases out of their region, okay? And they want reparations. So you send your diplomats in and you say, this is a win. Trump will paint it as a win. And you say, you know what? You got a good point. We really are tired of having all these bases so far from home. I'm President Trump, and I ran on a platform to bring the troops home. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to regain my MAGA faithful. I'm bring the troops home. So he agrees to do that. And he says, reparations, let's talk. Let's talk about how we might do business together, which is Trump's apparent strong point, how we can do business together. And that's all he's got to do. And then we'll be over with. Oh, I'm sorry. Rein in your attack dog in Israel. Okay. These guys need to stop expanding outside of their borders, and they need to sit at home and run their country like they should, like any normal country would run their country. So all Trump has to do, and Trump could do this, okay, because he changes his mind 14 times a day. He could do this very easily. He could sell it as a win. The war would be over with, and everybody would be happy. But you know what? He doesn't want to pull those troops. He thinks that's going to signify a loss. And Israel wants Americans to die for their various expansion efforts, which are not ending after this war, unless we make them end it. Okay, so right now, where's the trust level? Iran says, Israel's expanding. They're doing terrible things. What they did to Gaza, they're doing it to Lebanon now. What they did to Gaza, they're doing to Lebanon. The pictures match perfectly. Okay, the images we're seeing in southern Lebanon look like
they haven't struck the energy infrastructure yet. They haven't struck even bridges. I think they're going to strike the bridges now, the Litani River, but no.
Think about why Israel wouldn't strike energy resources in Lebanon. Why wouldn't they do that? Let's just think why that would be.
To get the Lebanese to turn on Hezbollah rather than turn on Israel?
No, they want the Lebanese gone. This is going to be Israeli energy. This is how you have to understand how Israel thinks about greater Israel. You don't have property rights. If you live next to Israel and have something they want, you don't have property rights. Okay, so Israel's not going to blow up until they absolutely have to. They are not going to damage anything they can use that Lebanon currently operates, and that definitely includes energy.
But I spoke to the IDF spokesperson about this. I said, look, there's a lot of people that are concerned about the greater Israel, and I don't blame them. Look what comments Spotrich and Ben-Gvir make. He's like, Mario, it's a very valid concern, but I can tell you this is a fringe. I know a lot of people in Israel say this, even if it's diplomats. And his point is like, Mario, if we really wanted to invade Lebanon, why did we pull out after October 7th? We pulled out of the majority of the territory, even though Hezbollah agreed to stop striking us. We kept bombing them. They weren't responding. And you had like 0.001% of the territory that was 3 hills at the border because Hezbollah was shooting at Israel from the hills. It's like, well, we pulled out all the way there. We don't want more territory. We much prefer just peace on the Lebanese border. We just want Hezbollah gone. Do you think that could?
When did he say this? He said this just recently, like this week.
Yeah. I spoke to him 2 days ago.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting, because the reason they focused not on Lebanon after October 7th is because they needed to do the Gaza thing, which entailed quite a bit of effort.
No, I mean, 2 years ago, after Gaza was pretty much gone, 2 years ago, they pulled out of the majority of the territory. Yeah. And, there's an argument to be made, like annexing Lebanese territory, having more territories, especially the southern territory, is just very valuable land. And I think there's a loud voice in Israel that might actually convince the government, especially if we get a more hardline government after Netanyahu. Even under Netanyahu, it might still happen that they end up overstaying their welcome. They overstayed their welcome from the 70s for 18 years.
They're going to overstay their welcome. I
really hope they don't.
What people can say about it, but I think we have enough decades of the practice of Israel, what they actually do, and this is under different prime ministers, right? This is under both types of Likud and the left government. Well, mostly it's all Likud now, I think, but when they used to have more of a two-party system. Same process. It's inexorable. The taking of property, the strategy of expanding Israel hasn't changed from the very beginning of the state. So that continues. And honestly, regardless of what their diplomats or their spokespeople say, that is now part and parcel of most Israelis' desires, regardless of what this guy said. Oh, the Israelis just want to live in peace and they're tired of war. No, they're not. They need this because that's how they have got land is a way to be safe. If you're not safe unless you are on the land, this is what they're taught. This is what they believe. And as long as they've had American top cover and a very powerful military, they have been able to pursue this step by step by step. And what they're doing in Lebanon, of course, they're not going to ruin the good stuff in Lebanon because they expect to take that. This is I'm sympathetic to all the people suffering, and that includes people in Israel. I am sympathetic to them. But when we look at how this is being conducted, you have to look at it in a Machiavellian way. You have to say, okay, follow the money. Look at what the interests are. Look at what they're willing to sacrifice for those interests. I mean, what Israel did in Gaza was done in full view of the whole world with criticism of the whole world and even some pushback from their trading partners. They lost friends. Israel lost trading partners and friends when they did that. But you know what? It was worth it to Israel to do what they did. And they're not done yet. They're not done yet because they still haven't beaten Hamas. So more will come. That's their value system. So given that this is a country with a government that is supported by their people that share this value system, that's, you can pretty much predict what they're going to do. So this is a big problem. In fact, this whole thing is, if Israel had considered, I'm a contained state, yeah, I don't want a two-state solution, but I'm not going to keep expanding. Let's say they had taken that approach and they wanted to actually, in Israel, build the same cities that Kushner proposed for Gaza. You remember his great, all these beautiful financial beach recreational cities that he would build. If Israel had paid attention to building that in Israel, not fighting with all their neighbors, they would be far wealthier than they are and way more peaceful, and we wouldn't have had this war that we have right now that is really, I think, ultimately harming America and weakening America more than anything in my whole entire lifetime. Even much more than Vietnam weakening us. Not the loss of life, but the structural, financial, economic weakness, military destruction of our capability to threaten the world. It's all getting pissed away. And if I was Russia and China, I would sit back and get the popcorn out.
Colonel, always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for coming on, and I'm sure I'll be speaking to you again. Hopefully things will, once we jump on the interview, hopefully one day we'll be like, hey, we have some good news. It's been today's day 20, and there hasn't been one day that wasn't worse than the day before, not one. So hopefully that will change. But
I hope some people will think and think about peace and do what they got to do, and don't be proud. Nobody needs to be proud about this. This is a human embarrassment on all sides that we're doing this. So we need to fix it.
Yeah, agree. Colonel, absolute pleasure. Thank you, Karen.
And thank you very much. Talk to you later.